I should have known something was up when the call came from an unknown number. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail. God knows I'd had enough of Richard's late-night just checking in texts. But something about the way it rang, insistent and sharp, made me pick up. We need to talk. Not hi, not is this, just 4 clipped words, delivered in a voice like chilled champagne, smooth, expensive, and designed to leave a bitter aftertaste. Eleanor. Of course it was Eleanor, Richard's wife, the woman whose photo I'd Googled exactly once, just to confirm she was as polished as his guilt made her out to be. Spoiler, she was. Pearls, blowout, the kind of smile that could cut glass. I almost laughed. Did she want to scream at me? Slap me? Beg me to leave her poor, misunderstood husband alone? But then she said the last thing I expected. Name your price. I remember the silence that followed, the way my fingers tightened around the phone, the hum of the city outside my apartment suddenly too loud. She wasn't asking. She was offering. And not in the messy, drunken way Richard had once slurred about leaving her. He wouldn't. This was cold, calculated, a transaction. We met at some absurdly discreet cafe, the kind with no signage, just a black door and a hostess who looked like she'd judge you for breathing wrong. Eleanor was already there, back straight, nails tapping the rim of her untouched espresso. No wedding ring. A power move, I assumed. Or maybe she'd already accepted it was worthless. She didn't waste time. 2 million, she said, sliding an envelope across the table. Cashier's check. You walk away today, you never speak to him again, and this stays between us. I should have been furious, or guilty, or something, but all I felt was a slow, creeping amusement. Because here's the thing about Richard. He wasn't worth a screaming match, let alone 7 figures. He was a mediocre man with a Rolex and a wandering eye, the kind who thought, I'll leave her was a pick-up line instead of a warning. So, I opened the envelope, glanced at the number, and then I did what any sane woman would do. I took the deal. Pleasure doing business with you, I said, tucking it into my bag. Eleanor's smile was thin. I'd say the same, but let's not pretend this is anything but what it is. Oh, I knew exactly what it was. She thought she was buying her marriage back. What she didn't realise? She'd just handed me the down payment on my revenge. The lawyer arrived 10 minutes later, a sleek briefcase in hand and a look of practiced detachment on his face, the kind of man who billed by the second and had never once lost sleep over ethics. He didn't introduce himself, just set the papers between us with the quiet efficiency of someone used to cleaning up rich people's messes. Eleanor watched me like I might bolt, her fingers steepled under her chin. Read it thoroughly, she said, though her tone made it clear she expected me to be too dazzled by the zeros to care about the fine print. I skimmed the first page. Standard non-disclosure language, a few lines about irrevocable severance of contact. Nothing surprising. But then I hit the real gem. The receiving party acknowledges this payment constitutes full and final settlement of any claims, real or imagined, pertaining to the aforementioned relationship. I nearly snorted. Imagined. As if I'd ever fantasized about Richard leaving his wife for me. Please. The man couldn't even remember my coffee order. The lawyer cleared his throat. There's a clause ensuring return of funds should you breach the agreement. And what constitutes a breach? I asked, just to watch Eleanor's eyelid twitch. Contact of any kind, written, verbal, digital. He adjusted his cufflinks, including third-party intermediaries. So no sending a friend to slip him a note, no drunken text from a burner phone. Not that I would, but it was almost cute how seriously they thought I'd cling to him. I flipped to the last page. No stipulations about Richard's future behaviour, no requirement that he remain faithful, or even that Eleanor had to stay married to him. Just me walking away clean. Pen? I held out my hand. Eleanor's exhale was barely audible, but I caught it. the faintest unravelling of tension. She thought she'd won, that this piece of paper would stitch her life back together like nothing had happened. The lawyer produced a Mont Blanc. Heavy, probably cost more than my rent. I scrawled my name at the bottom, the ink dark and final. "Pleasure," he said, though his expression said transaction complete. Eleanor didn't speak, just folded her copy into her purse with the reverence of someone tucking away a holy relic. I kept mine loose in my jacket pocket, already creased, a receipt for the world's easiest con. As I stood to leave, the lawyer murmured, "We'll be in touch with wiring instructions." "No need." I patted my bag where the check lay. "I prefers cash." The cafe door swung shut behind me, the bell jingling like a punchline. $2 million to walk away from a man I never wanted to keep. Best deal I ever made. The check burned a hole in my wallet all the way home, its crisp edges pressing against my thigh like a dare. I should have felt something. Regret, guilt, maybe even a twinge of sadness. But all I could muster was a giddy sort of disbelief. $2 million to stop answering some mediocre man's texts. If I'd known it was this easy, I would have started dating married men years ago. My apartment smelled like stale takeout, and the lavender candle I'd forgotten to blow out that morning. Richard's toothbrush still sat in my bathroom cup, that stupid electric one he'd insisted on leaving here for convenience. I plucked it up between two fingers, dropped it in the trash, and didn't even pause to reconsider. My phone buzzed. "Richard, of course. You free tonight?" I stared at the message, my thumb hovering. I could ghost him. That would be the cleanest way. But where was the fun in that? "Actually," I typed, "I'm seeing someone new." 3 dots appeared immediately. "What?" "Since when?" "Since about 20 minutes ago," I replied. "His name's Benjamin Franklin. Really knows how to show a girl a good time." The dots danced, stopped, danced again. I could practically see his confused frown through the screen. I sent a photo of the check, Eleanor's elegant signature clearly visible in the corner. Then I blocked his number before he could respond. The silence was glorious. I poured myself a drink, the good whiskey I'd been saving for a special occasion, and kicked my feet up on the coffee table. Through the window, the city lights flickered like they were in on the joke. Somewhere across town, Eleanor was probably patting herself on the back for saving her marriage. Richard was likely scrambling to come up with a new lie. And me? I was officially retired from the Mistress game, with a bank account that said I'd won. I thought about leaving town, a villa in Italy maybe, or one of those overwater bungalows where they bring you cocktails on floating trays. But that felt too much like running away. Besides, I liked my life here. I just liked it a hell of a lot more with an extra $2 million. The whiskey burned going down, smooth and expensive. I toasted my reflection in the dark window. To fresh starts, I said, and to the beautiful, inevitable chaos I'd left in my wake. The money hit my account on a Tuesday morning, while I was drinking burnt coffee from a chipped mug. That first zero-filled notification gave me a rush better than any of Richard's empty promises ever had. Most people would have blown it on designer bags and penthouse views, but I'd been poor before. The kind where you check your balance before buying groceries, and that sticks with you. I spent 3 days holed up with spreadsheets and market reports, the glow of my laptop the only light in the apartment. That check wasn't just money, it was ammunition. By Friday, I'd wired $1.5 million to a fintech startup run by 2 MIT dropouts who'd invented an algorithm that could predict cryptocurrency swings with unsettling accuracy. The remaining $500,000 became seed money for my own venture, a discreet consulting firm helping women navigate exactly the kind of situation I'd just escaped. The startup's founders, a pair of wide-eyed geniuses who still dressed like college students, nearly choked when I walked into their dingy office wearing a blazer that cost more than their rent. "We expected some Silicon Valley bro," the female co-founder admitted as we signed paperwork. I just smiled and adjusted the Cartier watch I'd bought myself as a single symbolic splurge. Life's full of surprises. By month 2, my investments were yielding returns that made Eleanor's payout look like pocket change. The startup's beta testing crushed projections, and my first consulting clients, all wealthy women who'd recognised themselves in my discreetly circulated story, paid premium rates for my particular brand of no-nonsense advice. I leased a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows just to watch the sunset glint off my new business cards, CEO, in bold black letters. Richard somehow got word of my new venture and sent a drunken email to my professional address. I had my assistant reply with an all-auto-generated out-of-office message and a link to my standard consulting rates. The $1,000 fee for infidelity crisis management was particularly poetic. Sometimes, when I'm reviewing quarterly reports or mentoring a new client, I think about that cafe meeting with Eleanor, how she'd looked at me like I was some temporary problem to be disposed of. Now, my portfolio was growing faster than her husband's collection of lies, and the irony tasted better than any revenge ever could. The money had been nice, the power was better, and the knowledge that I'd turned their weakness into my strength. That was priceless. The email arrived at 3:17 a.m. on a random Thursday, its subject line screaming in all caps, "We need to talk." I didn't have to open it to know who it was from. Only one person in my contacts still used that particular brand of desperate punctuation. I sipped my morning espresso, watching the steam curl into the crisp air of my new office, and clicked. Eleanor's message was a masterpiece of barely contained hysteria. "He's done it again," she wrote, as if we were old friends sharing gossip over brunch. "Less than 3 months after our agreement, and he's already replaced you with some vapid little intern." There was an attachment, a grainy photo of Richard with his arm around a blonde half his age at some upscale hotel bar. His hand was exactly where it shouldn't have been. I should have felt vindicated, maybe even a little sorry for her. Instead, all I could muster was a detached amusement. Did she really think buying me off would fix him? That the problem was me, and not the man who couldn't keep his hands to himself. My phone rang seconds later. Eleanor's name flashed across the screen, the same unknown number from months ago. I let it go to voicemail. She called again, and again. By the 5th attempt, I sighed and answered. "You owe me," she hissed, dispensing with pleasantries. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the skyline. Do I? This wasn't part of the deal. "Actually," I said, "the deal was very clear. I walk away. You pay me. Nothing in there about his future behaviour." A sharp inhale on the other end. "You knew this would happen." I laughed. "Everyone knew this would happen, you just didn't want to believe it." Silence. Then quieter. "I want my money back." Now that was rich. "Sorry," I said, "but that check cleared months ago. Consider it an investment in your education." She hung up. I imagined her sitting in some cavernous penthouse, staring at her reflection in a floor-to-ceiling window, realising too late that she'd spent a fortune on the wrong solution. My assistant buzzed in. "Your 10 a.m. is here." I deleted Eleanor's email without responding. Some lessons couldn't be bought. They had to be lived. And Richard, well, he was still out there, making the same mistakes, proving my point better than I ever could. I straightened my blazer and smiled. Send them in. Business, unlike men, never disappointed. The private investigator showed up at my favourite cafe, a quiet spot with mismatched china where I held my most discreet client meetings. He sat uninvited at my table, his cheap suit and overly polite smile giving him away before he even flashed his licence. "Miss Whitmore hired me," he said, stirring sugar into a coffee he hadn't ordered, as if we were old friends, as if I wouldn't immediately know why Eleanor had sent him. I didn't bother looking up from my tablet. Let me guess. She wants dirt to void our contract. His smile tightened. She's curious how you've expanded your resources so quickly. Ah, so it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the empire I'd built with it. I took a slow sip of tea, letting the silence stretch. The investigator shifted, his fingers tapping a nervous rhythm against his cup. He was young, probably new to trailing women for rich wives. Still, thought he was the hero in this story. You won't find anything, I said finally. No embezzlement, no shady dealings, just solid investments and smarter choices than your client ever made. He pulled out a notepad, the kind detectives use in bad movies. Your relationship with Mr. Whitmore lasted 6 months and ended the day I cashed his wife's check. I leaned forward. But you already knew that, just like you know he's on his third mistress since me. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Bingo. Eleanor hadn't told him everything. Probably couldn't stomach admitting how spectacularly her plan had failed. I slid a business card across the table, one from my consulting firm. Tell Miss Whitmore if she wants to know my secrets, she can book a session like everyone else. My calendar's open next Tuesday. The investigator left without finishing his coffee. I watched through the window as he climbed into an unremarkable sedan, already dialing his client. My phone buzzed with a calendar alert. Lunch with investors, 12:30. I paid my bill in cash, leaving an extravagant tip. The game had changed. Eleanor wasn't just angry anymore, she was scared. And nothing was more dangerous than a woman with nothing left to lose. Except, perhaps, a woman who'd already won. The story broke on a slow news Tuesday, buried between stock market updates and a celebrity divorce. By Wednesday morning, it had gone viral. I discovered it the way most people did, through a text from an old college friend with a screenshot and a string of crying laughing emojis. Page 6 had run a piece titled The $2 Million Mistress, How One Woman Turned a Scandal into Startup Gold, complete with my LinkedIn photo and carefully worded references to a prominent New York financier and his socialite wife. They'd even dug up the cafe where Eleanor and I had met, quoting an anonymous source who'd apparently watched our entire exchange. My first instinct was damage control. Then I read the comments. The internet, as it turned out, loved me. Women's business blogs called it a masterclass in turning lemons into lemonade. Finance Twitter debated whether I'd undervalued my silence. Memes sprouted overnight, side-by-side photos of sad mistresses in Lifetime movies versus my company's sleek website, captioned, "When you remember, you're the protagonist." Eleanor's response came via her lawyer, a cease and desist letter claiming defamation, which was laughable since the article never mentioned her by name. My attorney fired back with a copy of our contract, highlighting the lack of confidentiality clauses. We never heard from them again. Reporters started camping outside my office. I gave one interview to a no-nonsense financial journalist who cared more about my ROI than the salacious details. The takeaway isn't the scandal, I said, smoothing my blazer. It's that women should always know their worth, in business and in life. The quote ran in bold font, right above a graph showing my startup's valuation increase. By Friday, Richard's name had been outed by a Reddit sleuth. Photos surfaced of him with the intern, then with a bartender, then with someone's nanny. The hashtag #WhitmoreWipeout trended when 3 of his firm's biggest clients pulled their accounts. I watched the chaos from my balcony, drinking champagne with my CFO. "You planned this," she said, not even phrasing it as a question. I clinked my glass against hers. "Planned? No." I smiled. "But I certainly didn't stop it." The phone rang inside. Another investor, another interview request, another woman asking how she could do the same. I left them all waiting a little longer. The world had finally caught up to what I'd known all along. This was never about them. It was always about me. Eleanor's lawsuit arrived in a thick, cream-coloured envelope, hand-delivered by a stone-faced process server who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I accepted it with the same detached amusement I might show a misaddressed piece of mail, then dropped it onto my desk without breaking stride to my morning meeting. By noon, my legal team had dissected every line. The claims were laughable: breach of contract, unjust enrichment, even a vague stab at emotional distress. The real kicker? Eleanor was demanding not just the return of her $2 million, but additional damages for reputational harm. My lead attorney, a razor-sharp litigator with a 98% win rate, actually chuckled as she flipped through the pages. "She's claiming you knew he'd cheat again, making the agreement fraudulent." I swirled my pen between my fingers. "And we counter with the contract's explicit terms. No conditions, no guarantees. Just payment for silence." She smirked. "Then we depose Richard about his extracurricular activities. See how fast they fold." I didn't wait for them to fold. I leaked the complaint to the same reporter who'd broken the initial story, along with a one-sentence comment: "Some people pay for silence. Others pay for lawyers to complain about it." The backlash was instant. Legal analysts tore apart Eleanor's claims on cable news. Twitter erupted with side-by-side comparisons of my startup's success versus Richard's nosediving career. A feminist legal nonprofit offered to file an amicus brief on my behalf, arguing the case set a dangerous precedent for women's financial autonomy. Eleanor's legal team scrambled. A settlement offer appeared in my inbox within 48 hours. Drop the countersuit, keep the money, and they'd withdraw all claims. I countered with my own terms, a public retraction plus legal fees. They refused. So I released the deposition notice, scheduled for Richard to testify under oath about every affair, every lie, every time he'd sworn this one was different. The retraction appeared in the Times the next morning. My lawyer called it a victory. I called it predictable. But the real win came later when my inbox flooded with messages from women asking how to draft their own airtight contracts. I added a new workshop to my consulting roster: negotiating power when love isn't the only deal on the table. The seat sold out in 7 minutes. Eleanor had tried to play me in court. I'd already moved the game to an entirely different arena. The divorce papers hit the press before the ink was dry. Not the quiet, dignified separation Eleanor had imagined. This was a full-blown spectacle, complete with leaked prenup details and a viral video of Richard drunkenly serenading his latest fling at a Miami pool party. I watched the unravelling from the sidelines, my social media deliberately silent. No gloating posts, no smug commentary, just a single strategic like on a news article about Eleanor listing their penthouse, the one with the panoramic views Richard had once promised me he'd buy when things were simpler. My assistant buzzed in with the day's mail, including a handwritten note on heavy cardstock. Eleanor's signature loomed at the bottom, the ink slightly smudged as if she'd hesitated before sending it. "I hope you're happy," it read. No demands, no threats, just 5 words that told me everything I needed to know. She was done fighting. I tucked the note into my desk drawer, next to the framed copy of her retraction. Some trophies weren't meant for display. That evening, as I scrolled through photos of Richard's tearful exit from his former firm's headquarters, my phone lit up with an unknown number. Not Eleanor this time, not a lawyer. "You win," Richard's text read. I deleted it without replying. Victory wasn't in the message. It was in the fact that he still thought this was a competition. That after everything, he believed there was a version of this story where he mattered enough to be the prize. The real triumph was in my quiet office with its soaring windows, in the women who came to me now not for revenge plans, but investment strategies, in the unshakable certainty that I'd built something no man could ever take away. Outside, the city glittered, indifferent to one more failed marriage, one more disgraced financier. I turned off my phone and got back to work. By the time the financial magazines came calling, My company's valuation had grown to triple what Eleanor had paid me to disappear. The irony wasn't lost on me. The more her world shrank, the more mine expanded. My office walls, once bare, now displayed tasteful awards and the framed first dollar I'd earned independently of anyone's guilt money. The Forbes feature surprised me most. Not the 30 under 30 nod, that was expected, but the journalist's angle. How a scandal became a blueprint for financial independence. They'd interviewed 3 of my clients, women who'd used my strategies to negotiate better divorce settlements, secure promotions, or launch their own ventures. None mentioned Richard or Eleanor by name. They didn't need to. Investors who'd once hesitated now clamoured for meetings. I booked a speaking engagement at Harvard Business School, not as a cautionary tale, but as a case study in opportunity recognition. The students asked sharper questions than the reporters had. "How did you quantify your leverage?" one MBA candidate demanded. I smiled and quoted my own contract back to them. My assistant, a whip-smart Columbia grad who'd interned at Eleanor's favourite charity, brought in the mail with raised eyebrows. An embossed invitation to the Whitmore Foundation's annual gala. "Return to sender?" she asked. I ran my thumb over the gold foil. The event was at the museum Richard had taken me to once, whispering how boring he found it between stolen kisses. "No," I said. "Have flowers sent instead. White orchids." The same ones Eleanor had been arranging the day she'd first called me. That night, I reviewed quarterly reports while the gala unfolded across town. Photos surfaced online by midnight, Eleanor alone at her table, the vacant chair beside her more telling than any headline. My orchids stood centrepiece on the podium, where Richard should have given his speech. The business channels played my interview on loop the next morning as markets opened. My company's stock ticker scrolled beneath footage of the gala's empty chair. No one mentioned connections. They didn't need to. She came to me on a rain-slicked Tuesday, without an appointment or the armour of her usual couture. The woman waiting in my reception area bore little resemblance to the Ice Queen, who'd once slid a contract across a cafe table. Her Burberry trench was soaked at the hem, her manicure chipped. Only the eyes remained unchanged, that same flinty sharpness cutting through the carefully constructed exhaustion. My assistant hovered uncertainly. She refused to leave. I could have had security escort her out, could have let her sit there all day, humiliated by junior staffers stealing glances. Instead, I nodded toward my office. Eleanor moved like someone unaccustomed to entering rooms uninvited. Her gaze snagged on the framed Forbes cover behind my desk before settling into the chair across from me. No pleasantries, no pretense. Just raw, unfiltered need. I want to invest. The words hung between us, sour with desperation. I steepled my fingers. In what, exactly? Your women's fund, the one the Times wrote about? Her throat worked around something bitter. Consider it returning the favour. Ah, this wasn't about money. It was about optics, a chance to rebrand herself as something other than the scorned wife. I almost admired the hustle. I pulled up her foundation's tax filings on my screen, turning the monitor so she could see the numbers. Your assets are frozen pending the divorce settlement. A muscle jumped in her jaw. I have jewellery, art, which you'd have to sell at a loss. I closed the file. I don't take charity cases, Eleanor. The veneer cracked then, revealing something jagged beneath. What did you want me to do? Let him keep. I wanted you to aim higher. I pushed a prospectus across the desk. My latest venture, a fund exclusively backing female-led startups. You thought buying me off would solve your problem. But the problem was never me. Rain lashed the windows as she stood abruptly, her reflection warped in the glass. For a heartbeat, I saw it. The woman she might have been if she'd spent half the energy on herself that she'd wasted on him. The door clicked shut behind her with finality. My assistant appeared instantly. "Should I send the standard investor packet?" I said, turning back to my work. Everyone deserves the chance to learn, even if the lesson came too late. The package arrived on the anniversary of our cafe meeting. A sleek black box tied with a silver ribbon, the kind of presentation Eleanor would appreciate. My assistant eyed it like it might contain anthrax, but I recognized the stationery immediately. The Whitmore Foundation's embossed logo gleamed under my office lights as I sliced through the silk cord with my letter opener. Inside lay 2 items: a check for $250,000 made out to my women's fund, and a single sheet of ivory paper with 3 handwritten words. "Invest this better." No signature, no return address. Just Eleanor's distinctive, razor-sharp penmanship, the same hand that had signed away $2 million to erase me from her life. I burst out laughing. The check cleared within hours. I didn't send flowers this time. Instead, I had my team draft a formal investment agreement, complete with quarterly reporting requirements and a seat on the advisory board. Terms identical to those we gave all major donors. The paperwork went out via courier to the only address that mattered now, the modest Tribeca apartment where Eleanor had relocated after the divorce. She accepted the terms without negotiation. 6 months later, at our inaugural fund summit, I spotted her across the ballroom, not in her usual front row perch, but deep in conversation with one of our grantees, a 22-year-old coding prodigy from Queens. Later, during the champagne toast, our eyes met. No nods, no smiles. Just the barest lift of her glass before she turned back to the conversation at hand. Richard's bankruptcy made page 6 the following week. The photo showed him leaving court, shoulders hunched against the paparazzi flashes, his new girlfriend, the intern from the scandal, already halfway out of the frame. I might have pitied him if I'd spared him a thought at all. The real story unfolded in the business section. Our fund's latest investment in a female-founded AI startup, with Eleanor listed as lead sponsor. The accompanying quote from her was masterful in its simplicity. "Some returns can't be measured in percentages." I had the article framed. It hangs in my office now, between the first check she ever wrote me and the latest from our fund's record-breaking quarter. Visitors assume it's about the money. They compliment the elegant display, the polished symbolism. But the truth? The truth is in the empty space between those 2 frames. The quiet understanding that the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's transformation. And as the late afternoon light catches the glass, turning both checks into golden relics of a war neither of us needed to win, I can almost hear the whisper of silk against cafe chairs, the scratch of a pen on expensive paper. Almost. My intercom buzzes. Another investor, another opportunity, another woman ready to rewrite her ending. I press the button, leaving ghosts where they belong. Send them in. The game, after all, was never about them. It was always about what comes next.